Hello, I'm Elby Beddes, and I'm an assistant professor of psychology at Colorado State University, Pueblo. In this teaching takeout, I'm sharing with you an assignment that I use in some of my classes. I call it an alternative representation because I view the assignment as an alternative to the typical APA formatted academic literature review assignment that often occurs in undergraduate psychology courses. I developed this assignment based on research in constructivist education and student centered learning. Constructivism is a rather loose term that is used by philosophers, curriculum specialists, psychologists, educators, and others. But essentially, constructivism frames learning as an active and personal responsibility rather than as the passive reception of information that is transmitted to students by teachers or by textbooks. In constructivism, learners are active participants in their education. Essentially, under the constructivist perspective, I, as the teacher, can hand you the resources. I can tell you what I think or how I view the information or the concepts, but until you do something with that information, you're not really learning. Constructivism is based, at least in part, on the research of Jean Piaget, Lev Vygotsky, Bartlett, Bruner, Dewey, and of course the Gestalt psychologists. There are some common elements in the vast and woolly area of constructivism. These common elements center on how knowing or how knowledge is constructed. So in constructivist teaching, knowing develops as learners try to make sense out of their experiences. Knowledge is only useful if you can use it. So simply storing facts is not knowledge. It's important to recognize that students' constructions will not necessarily mirror external reality. So constructions can be unique to the learner, but that also means that constructions are not all going to be equally useful or reliable. Learning environments should be rich and complex. And within those rich and complex learning environments, students need to face fuzzy problems, kind of ill-defined sort of case studies in order to flex their problem-solving skills. Social negotiation is crucial for learning. Social negotiation includes interaction, collaboration, and debate. Students need to learn civil discourse. They need to work on their ability to defend their position while also remaining open to other people's perspectives or points of view. And students need to see multiple perspectives and representations of a concept. And situated knowledge. So situated knowledge is it's a kind of a constructivist perspective that says that much of what is learned in a specific situation is actually specific to the situation in which it was learned. So what is true in one time and place can actually become false in another time and place. For example, the world is flat. Like this was true for Columbus's day, but it's not true anymore. True in one time and place, not true in another time and place. Situated learning is sometimes referred to as enculturation. So adopting the norms, beliefs, language, and attitudes of a specific community. And then community is also subject to varied definitions. So mathematicians, teacher educators, gang members, psychology students can all be considered communities. And student-centered learning. So student-centered learning is a constructivist approach that specifically centers the student in the learning process. What we call something guides how we think about it. So Weimer argued that what we call things really does matter. If we call education student-centered learning, it can remind us why we show up every day. It can remind us, the purpose of our work and help us remember to plan our days accordingly. All right, with a constructivist and student-centered theoretical frame in place, it's time to pivot to assessment. We, as educators, have a professional responsibility to certify the extent to which our students have met the learning objectives. According to Weimer, the assessment or the evaluation itself, ideally, is also a learning activity. And for better or worse, grades play a leading role in education. I love this quote from Polio and Humphreys, and rather pointing to it as a dated quote, I choose to call it timeless. So according to Polio and Humphreys, grading outstrips both intercollegiate athletics and intramural sports as the most frequently played game on the college campus. It takes place in all seasons, and everyone gets to play one position or another. The traditional final exam in introductory psychology courses is a comprehensive multiple choice test. However, research on student learning has consistently shown that while multiple choice exams might have their place, they're not inherently the best gauge of student success, and they certainly shouldn't be the only indicator of student learning. Enter the alternative representation. So the alternative representation builds on another assignment that I commonly use in my introductory psychology courses, the connection assignment. In the connection assignment, students practice integrating and applying concepts from our course into their own life throughout the semester. Most of the students who pass through my introductory psychology class are not psych majors and are regrettably probably never going to take another psychology class during their undergraduate careers. So I find it really important to help these students find meaningful connections with the content that they are able and willing to share with their peers, their friends, and their family members. For the alternative representation, students find ways to meaningfully represent psychological concepts using aesthetic or arts-based approaches. Students can use collage, drawing, painting, digital tools, poetry, creative nonfiction, music, interpretive dance. The sky is the limit. The only limitations that I impose for this assignment are that they cannot write an APA formatted academic paper, and that if they plan to use AI, they must first clear that with me and justify its use. Many of the alternative representations that are submitted are arts-based. I've also like visual arts, painting, drawing, and the like. But I've also had some very engaging performances and audiovisual projects. So for example, I've had several students write poems. I've had a couple of students write and perform original musical compositions that center on psychological concepts. I had one student perform an interpretive dance and then ask his peers to tell him what they thought the dance was about. It turned out that his project was a depiction of projective testing. I also had a team of students who, with prior approval, used AI to create a guided tour of the neuron hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson. So when I say the sky is the limit here, I do really mean it. So I have a couple of visual art examples that I'm going to share with you. And remember that in each of these examples, the students stood in front of their peers, they defined the concept that they selected in their own words, and then they presented their work and also fielded questions from their peers about the image that they were showing. This particular example is a comic that one of my students created to illustrate the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect, of course, being the principle that workers modify their behavior, often increasing productivity when they think or they know that they are being observed. You can see in the image you have coworkers chit-chatting because they think the camera is off. One of the workers says, "Do you think we should get back to work before we get in trouble?" And the other says, "Oh, please, no one's even watching. The camera is ... Now the camera is on." And they quickly act like they are busy. And the supervisor, only seeing them busy, thinks he suddenly or thinks that he has the world's best employees. This is a really powerful original piece depicting body dysmorphia. This particular student, of course, again, stood in front of the class, shared the definition, shared this piece that they had created, and then also provided additional context around some of the research on differences in body dysmorphia across genders. This is a really interesting piece on the bystander effect. So the student in question was exploring the potential impacts that technology has had on the bystander effect in terms of whether and when and how bystanders might intervene. And here's another really interesting piece depicting the malleable nature of memory. So this particular image centers on the idea that whatever you're thinking about in a given moment is what you're experiencing. But as you are thinking about it, you're also incorporating new information and new context to that memory, which then becomes stored once again. So this evolving and malleable nature of memory. In this piece, the student chose to depict the various states of consciousness along a spectrum as represented through a sense of wholeness or completeness of identity at each of the sort of nebulous levels or states of consciousness. I initially developed the alternative representation as a celebratory way to end the semester for my introductory psych and concurrent enrollment students. Students would create their projects and then present to their peers during our finals window. The goal sort of being to end the semester on an upbeat, happy, positive note. I have, however, also included the alternative representation as an option in other classes that I teach, such as an assignment, it's called a homework and wellness assignment in the psychology of art, part of our creative wellness program at Colorado State University, Pueblo. I've also included it as an extra credit opportunity in our positive psych course. So this image is a digital collage that was made by a student for the art and wellness assignment in psychology of art. She titled it The Overthinker and based it on readings from 2 of the weeks that we had centered on to discuss self and identity as a life narrative. So if we were in person together synchronously, I would encourage you to think about how you might integrate or adapt this approach for use in one of your classes. And then I would ask you to have a conversation with another educator, sort of sharing those potential ideas or plans for using this approach, or even kind of thinking about some of the other constructivist assessments that you are currently using or hoping to use in your classes in the upcoming semester. I have aligned this alternative representation assignment with the APA student learning goals and outcomes, and you can read more about that here in this slide. And if you have any questions or would like to further this conversation, please feel free to reach out to me via email. You can find me at elby.beddes@csupueblo.edu. And finally, here are some references and resources on constructivist education and student-centered practices if you would like to, do some additional reading on your own. Thank you so much for your time in viewing this teaching takeout. And please do, if you have any questions, please do reach out via email. Thank you.